one of the questions we ask ourselves when we're like afraid of something, what about me? Like, what would I do if? And Marcus Aurelius goes, you'll meet that with the same weapons you've met all your other problems. So remembering that like, hey, you've been scared before and you're still here. Often what our fear is really doing is underestimating or undercounting how good we actually are at what we do. You're the same person you are today. And what will you do? You'll figure it out. If you quit your job, you'd be like, I'm quitting and I'm gonna go find a new job. But if you got fired, that suddenly feels like disempowered, whereas the other one feels very empowered. So remembering what you're capable of, to me, is really important.
Okay, that's one.
Number two, the Stoics say that we should always be training. So one of the reasons I think it's important to have like a physical practice, one of the reasons it's good to seek out adversity and difficulty is so when stuff happens, you're ready. Epictetus, one of the early Stoics, he's actually a slave, and he says like, you want to get to a point where when stuff happens, you're able to say like, this is what I trained for.
Right.
Like you knew this could happen and you did the work.
Yes. Before you go into the next one, it's right when the pandemic happened, I was like, this sucks. And yet I've been training for this for the last like 12, 13 years of my life.
Yes.
Because in 2008, in 2007, I got injured and had surgery. And then 2008, the housing crisis, and there were no jobs for someone like me without a college degree that was ignorant from school. I was like, I better develop myself so that when this happens again in 5, 10, 20 years, I'm ready to take on any adversity.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not fun and it's still challenging, but I'm prepared and ready. And I spent 13 years training for that moment. And I felt a sense of, kind of weirdly, I felt a sense of peace that gave me the energy and the clarity to take action and shift where I needed to and lead from a place of courage as opposed to, and I wasn't perfect, but lead from a more calm, peaceful place as opposed to, frantic, fearful place.
Well, look, preparation makes you brave, right? You prepared, so you were ready. And then I think also because you remembered what you felt then, you were also in a position to lead and understand what people who were not as prepared
what they're
needed to hear.
Yeah, what they're experiencing. It sucks. So you can have empathy like you talked about, you can connect with people in that way. Okay, so always be training, always be learning something new, training yourself physically, mentally, emotionally.
And the third one would be this Stoic exercise of memento mori, which basically means remember you will die. And I actually carry a coin in my pocket that says this. But I think when you realize like, hey, life is already short and fragile, like I don't need to, if I'm spending my time cowering in fear or worrying, I'm acting as if I have a certain power over things that I don't. There's this famous Stoic story where like the emperor sees this Stoic philosopher he hates, and he's like, I'm threatening you to or I'm sentencing you to death. And he's like, I was already sentenced to death.
At some point.
He's like, you have no more power over me than I had, than life itself
than Mother
has.
Nature, just be dying.
And so realizing that life is fragile, I think sometimes people can miss this. Like memento mori doesn't mean like, don't wear a motorcycle helmet or pretend the pandemic is not real. That's not what it's saying. But it's saying like, hey, focus on the parts of safety and concern that are in your control. But if you're wasting your time being afraid, that's something I thought a lot about in the pandemic. It's like, look, I don't know, especially early on, we don't know where this is going, don't know what it means, don't know what is ticking clock is in anyone's body, right? What pre-existing condition you might have or bad piece of luck you got. So you take it seriously, but within that, what are you doing with your time, right? Like, what are you going to spend your time on? So if you're spending that time worrying, stressing,
watching the news all day,
what you're actually doing is rejecting the life that you have in front of you in this moment.
It's kind of like a longer eclipse. It's like there's an eclipse that's happening. We don't know what this is, but you could sit there and worry and fear for those 5 minutes of the eclipse or whatever, or you can look up and enjoy it and do something with your time and make the most of this and prepare and strategize and organize your time.
Yeah, James Stockdale, who spends 7 years in a prison camp in Vietnam, who reads the Stoics, he says, he gets there and he goes, I never lost sight of the fact that I controlled the end of the story, right? So if he got out, that he would control the end, he would decide what, he said, and that I could turn this into something that in retrospect I would not have traded for. And
Isn't that crazy?
that's incredible.
It's like Mandela as well. It's like, what,
Yeah.
25 years or something?
So I think it takes courage to say,
Man.
this thing happened to me and I wouldn't have chosen it. I didn't want it. But now that it's here, I'm going to face it. I'm going to apply all my training and experience towards it. And then I'm not going to waste my life being bitter, resentful, afraid, passive about it. And I'm just going to get to work turning it into something.
Yeah. I'm not sure if this is 100% true or accurate, but I heard someone say that Bhutan is like the happiest country.
Really?
I'm not sure if you've heard of this. It's because, I don't know if everyone does this or just some people do this there, they focus on their death 5 times a day.
Interesting.
They think about their death 5 times a day. And so there's an app, I think it's called Croaked, or,
Yes,
or,
I've
you,
seen
will,
this.
or You Will Croak, or you
Yeah.
will, something like that, where 5 times a day, I had it for a while, it sends you a reminder, you're gonna die,
Yeah.
with an inspiring quote that has you reflect on your death 5 times a day to remind yourself. Do you have this on your phone?
No. Did I give you one of these? This is what I
coin?
carry in my pocket. Yeah.
Let me see. Oh, nice.
You should just carry that. I keep.
Okay.
It's like a nice weight. So I spin it, and the idea is.
You could leave life right now.
And the rest of that quote. So Mark Stewart says you could leave life right now, and then he says, "Let that determine what you do and say and think." And so to me, the power of meditating on your death is that it puts everything in perspective, right? It doesn't make things meaningless. It actually makes them meaningful because it says like, if this doesn't matter, I shouldn't be doing it. And if it does matter, I should be doing it as if it is the last time that you get to do it.
Right.
Like, I think one of the things, I don't know about you, but like as like an ambitious or driven person, I find myself like rushing a lot, right? Like gotta go here, gotta go there. This is taking too long. I don't want to wait. I even found myself like my son, he often like naps in the car. So it's like, you're in the car as long as he's asleep. And I'll find myself like, you're behind a slow driver and you're like, I gotta get around this. And then I'm like, but I'm not going anywhere, right? Like I'm rushing. And so what I've started to remind myself is like, what are you rushing towards? You're rushing towards death, right? Not just because speeding is unsafe, but you're rushing towards, like as you're rushing out of a moment, you're rushing away from life. Seneca talks about, he says, don't think of death as happening in the future. Think of death as happening right now.
Really? Why?
The time says because the time that passes belongs to death, right? Like so when you die, you're like you've lived 80 years, but
Yes.
you've also that's 80 dead years that can never come back. So if you think about the time that passing as being death happening, like every minute you're getting closer to death. You don't want to rush through a moment. You want to fully experience the moment.
Even if you're waiting in line or behind a car or impatient.
This is life. And when you're rushing away from it, or you're rushing toward death. And so you slow down and you go, okay, I've been alive 34 years.
Right.
What do I have to, was I alive for 34 years?
Or was I rushing?
Right. Or was I rushing away to get to 35? But maybe I die at 35, right? You don't know. So if you just go like, the present is here, I'm going to be controlled enough and courageous enough to just, this is enough, this is it, doesn't need to be anything or anywhere else. I'm just going to be here and I'm not going to rush away. And kids have really been helpful for this because you're like, oh, not only am I rushing potentially like towards death, but you're, at the very least, they will never be this age again. So as you're trying to get this over with, you have to intellectually
miss those years.
Yeah, and eventually you'll be like, oh, if only they were 5 again, right? Like but when they were 5, you wanted it to be over, and so
the screaming, the crying, the pooping, or whatever it is. It's like, oh, I wish they could do this on their own, but you'll look back and
you
be like,
don't really want that.
yeah.
So
You want them to stay there forever. You're like, I'm
course.
going to capture this moment.
Yeah, and this is true even for the shitty stuff. Like even when you're stuck in traffic, even when
Right.
you're home with the flu, even when, like,
So true. It's like, I don't know if you think about this. I mean, you've always just been like talented and successful your entire life, unlike me, where I struggled and went through pain for years. But I feel like, especially the years after my dream was over playing football, and I was like, well, who am I? What is my identity? What is the value I add to the world if this was my value? How can I, just survive and thrive in this world without that value or identity anymore? I remember just being in a state of uncertainty for a while and wanting to get out of it.
Yeah.
Wanting to have a job, wanting to launch a business, wanting to have money, wanting to have an audience, wanting to have a book, all these different things, wanting to have something.
Yeah.
And when I look back and I'm like, man, those moments were really meaningful of what I was living and learning moment and day by day. The struggle, the pain, the adversity. Like, I'm recreating that in other ways just by trying to get to the next level, but I'll never live that aspect, those moments again, the specific time.
Well, and when you got those things, was it as magical as you thought it would be? It never is.
It wasn't, it wasn't as fulfilling. It was cool to see like a full circle and reflect back, but it was never like, oh, I've made it,
You never feel like you've made
No.
it. And so that, like, I talk about this a little bit in some of my stuff where, like, what will happen is you get to the medal stand, right? You
Right.
New York Times bestseller, Olympic gold medal, All-American, whatever the thing is, right? And there's an anticlimacticness to
Very.
it.
After 10 minutes, you're like, now
you
what?
talk about this in the School of Greatness.
Yes.
You're like, now what? So the problem is people can learn, you can go two ways. You feel the now what. So you can go, now, I got to find something really meaningful.
I gotta go bigger.
Well, no. So you either you look at that and you're like, oh, it was never about accomplishments. It was always about being present and meaning and connection and the friends you made along the way.
Right.
Or you go, oh, it's that I have to do it again. Or, oh, it wasn't $1 million, it was $1 billion.
Yeah.
And so you can see why that moving of the goalposts creates really successful people. But they are rarely happy people.
Happy or fulfilled.
Yes,
Or,
and they
or
often
peaceful inside.
yes, and I think it's the journey I'm on. What I'm trying to do, I would like to be proof that it is possible to be world class at what you do and come from a place of contentment and fullness. Not being like, I just need this, then I will be good, because you're never ever good.
There's always going to be some writer better than you, or someone that writes a book in a way that's different than you, or some whatever. There's going to be someone more talented, more successful,
I remember
richer.
Of course. I mean, you meet someone. There's a story about Joseph Heller and Kurt Vonnegut. Kurt Vonnegut wrote Slaughterhouse-Five. Joseph Heller wrote Catch-22. Two of the great writers of the 20th century. And they're at this party, and you've been at parties like this, where like you're at a much richer person, right? like one of those. You're like, why am I even here? And Kurt Vonnegut is teasing Joseph Heller, and he says, like, this guy made more money this week than your book will make in its entire life.
Right.
And he says, yeah, but I have something he doesn't have.
What's
and
that?
he's like, what could that possibly be? And he says, I have enough.
Ooh.
And it's not that guy just wrote Catch-22 and then he sat on his ass. He wrote other great stuff. He did great work. He just wasn't coming at it from a place of craving. Like, we had that word thirst. Like, he wasn't thirsty. He was quenched, but he was doing it because he actually liked it. I remember the first time one of my books hit #1, I was mowing the lawn at my house. And my agent, Steve, called me, and I was like, now I have to finish mowing this lawn. It was like,
You're like, okay, I had a 10-minute moment, and I'm still here, like, pushing this thing.
And then you realize, like, oh, it's never going to be, I don't know what I thought it was going to be, but I didn't think it was going to be that. And I feel grateful that I didn't think, oh, I have to have back-to-back #1s. That will be it.
It's interesting. I remember Steve, when Steve called me, because we were the same agent, and when I didn't hit #1, but I hit the New York Times bestseller list. And I remember for like an hour just being like, wow, this is something I dreamed about. But then after an hour, like calling everyone and being like, congratulations, I was like, did anything change? Like, nothing really changed. I accomplished a thing. Yeah, there wasn't like opening up the gates and money dropping down or people calling me. It's like a few people noticed and you do one post on Instagram and then people compliment and then people move on.
Well, so on
and
this
time moves on. It's
on this book, I'm actually thinking about that because when you do a book, there's this whole lane of prioritization of like, how do you get on the list?
Yes.
And it takes a lot of your time and energy.
Man.
And why do you do it? It's obviously there's some business reasons, but part of it is,
Mm-hmm.
if not ego, it's this like people said that's important. So you're like,
Yes.
that's as good a target as any. On this one, and I'm a little bit of a thing with my publisher where I'm like, no, I just want to like get as many books in people's hands as possible. So I'm like ignoring all that. But there's a kind of a fear there because it's like, the one benefit of that strategy is that the success is clear and objective and recognizable by other people.
Yes.
So like the book's gonna come out. I know it's doing well. I already know the track that it's on. But like, I'm not saying I'm gonna get condolences, but there are people who are gonna be like, oh, guess it didn't work as well. Like so
it's kind of been like all your books. They like didn't hit right away. It's like 2 years later. Now it's number one. And it's crushing.
Just the idea of like, hey, you have to determine what success is to you and to not base it on what other people like.
That's so hard. That's courage.
It's hard to do
I tell you what, for me, the last 2 years, I've been working on developing a new book, but I've also been like, gosh, do I do the traditional publisher thing? And I've been having these conversations, but I'm like, I just want to let that go and just write a good book that people are impacted by.
Right.
But it's like, oh, do you worry about the advance and what people are going to ask you about it, or do you not care about that at all?
Yeah.
Self-publish it and just try to help as many people as possible. Is there a balance? And literally, it has been holding me back until in the last like 6 weeks. For the last couple of years, I've been in this limbo. I think one, because I've been trying to like build my business in the pandemic and shifting, but this has been on my mind, this conversation for 2 years during all this. And it's not until now where I'm just like, okay, I need to get clear and I just need to take action and do it from the highest level place possible. Do things that are smart as well for business, but also just do what's going to help as many people.
What's a safety net, right? To do it, to do the conventional, like this is how it's done, is safer. Because like then no one's going to be like, what an idiot.
Right.
Or like,
oh, he's falling off the wagon. Or
or he's a loser, it didn't work. He's on the decline.
Yeah.
And so the decision to like do stuff that you care about, that requires sort of like burning the boats behind you and just going like, I'm on this journey. And I think it's particularly hard in today's world where, there's view counts and likes. Like there's so much more public quantification of what's done. And like when I talk to sports teams, I sometimes say that I'm a little bit jealous. That it's like, it's obvious whether they're doing a good job or not.
You're jealous?
I love the clarity of sports. Like
lose. Win, loss,
how
track
many points,
and field, yes.
Stats.
Did you get the height or not? Yes.
But the reality is, in the world that the rest of us exist in,
it's like a committee and how many people like it and who you're
running your own race. Yeah. Like you have to decide what success is.
I know.
And that means criticizing yourself when you fall short of your own metrics. And it also means congratulating yourself on a success that perhaps other people don't recognize.
Right. The success could be just, I'm proud of this chapter I wrote in this week or this month, even though no one's going to see it. Yeah. No one's like buying this, but I'm proud of the work that I'm putting in, the effort, the energy, the process.
I've tried to get to, I would say that on my first book, I was 10%, this is a success because I made it and it was the best I was capable of, and 90%, let's see what the results are. Like, let's see how it does. And I would like to think that as I've gone forward, that's slowly flipped and that I'm now 90, it's already a success because it exists.
Even if no one buys this,
it's my best work.
Yeah.
And then 10% like bonus, like, hey, it worked, won awards, got recognition.
But isn't it the, like we talked about in the beginning, there's kind of like 3 levels to like a book. There's the mastery of writing the book, which you've become one of the greatest writers of our time, in distilling wisdom, ancient wisdom, and creating practical examples on how you can actually do this for today's life. And millions of people have read your books. But you could master writing the book, but you also have to master doing the marketing and promotion and putting yourself out there and communicating it. And then master being patient. Maybe you put out the great book and no one cared about it right now for a few years, but then you be patient and people start buying it.
Well, I think you want to rank them. So the Stoics say that their first task in life, the most important task in life, is what is up to me and what is not up to me.
Think of all the amazing things in life that are expressions of just you. For instance, the song you stream over and over again while you're in your 13th hour of gaming at 4 a.m. in the morning with all the lights off, trying not to wake up your roommates. Or the recommendations that you share with your friends on the top 6 comedy podcasts that are the best to listen to on your way to the gym and back. Or even your new haircut, which may or may not be an epic bowl cut from the 90s and hopefully is. Everything that makes you, you, makes all the difference. State Farm believes insurance should work the same way. Your plan, your coverage, they need to be personalized to you. And the ability to choose the plan you want by picking the options that fit you, like building your home and auto policies, is exactly what the State Farm Personal Price Plan is all about. Getting the coverage you want at an affordable price just for you. So, are you ready to make things personal? Call or go to statefarm.com today to create your State Farm Personal Price Plan. Prices vary by state. Options selected by customer, availability, and eligibility may vary.
Like separating things into the category of, is it in my control? Is it not in my control? So as I look at like any project or business or whatever, I prioritize based on like what's most in my control to what's least in my control. So like the first mastery of the thing itself, like is it the best album, the best video, the best live event it could possibly be? You have as much control over that as you're going to have of anything, because that's yours. So like there you have the ability to get most of the win before it's even out. Then marketing and promotion and communicating and talking about it, that's like more something you have influence over as opposed to something you control. Right? Because it's like, what's happening in the world, like how on point or trend is your thing, but it's also, are you willing to put in the time? Are you willing to, so many people just think they're better than that. And so they don't do it. And then the third part is the patience or the time, or it's like, you gotta, the audience will like it. You imagine you're Herman Melville, you write Moby Dick, it gets savaged. Everyone's like, this is not just not good. This is
horrible.
Yeah. You should be, we're offended that you did it. And then only like towards the end of your life and after your life, does it finally get the recognition you just, so that part's the least in your control. And you have to be somewhat detached from that.
Right.
Because if you wake up every day and you're like, is this the day that people finally recognize me for all my contributions? You have handed your happiness over to something that's not up to you.
It's true. It's funny as you were saying that. I grew up in a religion called Christian Science that a woman discovered this religion and wrote a book called Science and Health.
Yeah.
And this is the same time back in the late 1800s when Mark Twain was around. And they were kind of like frenemies, I guess. And Mark Twain wrote an entire book trashing this woman, Mary Baker Eddy, and her findings of the science behind healing. It was essentially like the science of Jesus' healing.
Okay.
Here's how it works. Here's how the mind works and how we can heal ourselves. And he wrote an entire book bashing her and the religion called Christian Science, which was like this critical of her work because she kept writing the same book with expanded updates every year, like so many different editions of the same book.
Yeah.
And it kept hitting #1. And he had to write new books all the time. Right. So I think he was just frustrated that this woman kept writing the same book over and over with like, here's more finding and research and science of how the mind and body is healed through the mind. And it's funny, like, she just kept going because she was focused on the work and healing people one at a time and the message spread. But I think it's interesting that, for a reason that came up for me because the more you put your work out there, the more criticized it's going to be open to. There's more people are going to be willing to criticize it. And I think a lot of people aren't ready for criticism. They're not trained to deal. No one teaches you how to deal with criticism when you have an audience.
No one teaches, because it's a champagne problem that a lot of people never get to.
Yes.
So there's not like a lot of instructions, but it is inevitable. And like, you have to realize, I've realized a couple things. One is like, critics are almost always louder than your fans. Like people who dislike something are much louder than the people who are like,
Why is
that's
that?
pretty good.
Why is that?
I think it's one feels more strongly than the other. Like the stuff I like, I'm like, cool.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
You know? But then when you really hate something, you're like, I need them to suffer how I am suffering. So a lot of times I think you're just different levels of enthusiasm.
So when was the moment then where you were able to look at yourself and realize I have either conquered this inner rage, beast, whatever you want to call it, and you do have control?
Well, I have to go, now we go flash forward.
Yes.
Okay. My wife and I had been through, first of all, in 2010, it was the end of our marriage. We had been married 20 years.
Wow.
And, this whole time I had had an addiction to pornography, and I had never told her. And 10 years earlier, I had, basically cheated on her at a massage parlor.
Right.
But I vowed I'd never tell anybody. I said, man, I'm taking this to my grave. It's not happening. But see, you got to understand another thing too, is there's this competition, but also this guilt that I was always carrying.
Because
rage.
of that, yeah, because
creates
of that.
rage.
Yeah, of course. And shame.
Shame. I used to get into arguments, so she asked me questions like, do you watch porn? And stuff. Hey, no, don't even bring that up. What are you talking about? You know what? No, listen, I don't know who you think you are. And start an argument. So she'd be like, I'm out. Just so she wouldn't bring up more. Because I knew what I was doing.
Right.
And I knew that I wasn't living right. I mean, the one thing is, it's almost like, you say one lie, and it turns into 2, turns into 10.
And it eats you inside of you too.
You're talking about 10 years. Now, I vowed I would never tell anybody. And my wife was always like, she would just bring up stuff like, what is it? What are you doing, man? I don't know. You ever cheat on me? Stuff like that. And I'm like, no, I don't know. I don't know what you're talking about, and angry. And what you would do, and one thing that I would do is project.
Of course.
So I was like, why are you saying that? Are you thinking about cheating? And again, this manipulative game that you could play with the people you love,
Right.
the people who love you, or you claim to love, just so you can keep your thing together. You know what I mean? And this is the thing, Louis, is that I realized that the image of Terry Crews was more important than who Terry Crews was.
Dang.
And I had to worship that image.
Who?
And it ran everything.
Because what would happen if who Terry Crews was really came out instead of the image? What would happen then?
Well, my mindset, I had to play. I was like, I'd lose everything. First of all, my wife would leave. People who knew me would be ashamed. People who knew me they would run away. Everybody would be done. All of it would be finished. Every bit of who if people found out who I really, really was, or what I was really, really thinking and contemplating, how I had done, then it would be the end of me.
Wow.
So I decided, and we're gonna put this image up, and we're gonna prop it up. And it's like having an image on these really weak posts. You know what I mean? It would get bumped, and it's like swaying, and you're doing everything you can to hold it. I got to put another beam up on there just to hold it up because it's getting rickety. And the longer it goes, the more rickety it gets. And it all fell, 2010.
Wow.
And my wife was like, I'm out. I'm done. And because what happened was she finally asked me, because we had just been getting farther and farther apart over the years. And she said, what is it I don't know about you, Terry Crews? And I told her. I told her about what happened 10 years earlier. Now, in my head, I'm like, hey, that was 10 years ago. But for her, it was today. And she was like, I'm out.
Wow.
Don't come home. And what I realized is that she had married an image. And what she realized is that she didn't know me.
Right.
She was like, who are you? And I let her stay in that. And one thing about men is that what we're looking for is intimacy. Like literally someone who knows us inside and out and loves us anyway. But if you never reveal who you really are, you can never, ever have intimacy.
Amen to that.
You understand what I mean? You can't. It's impossible because you have to know who you are.
Absolutely. You have to share who you are.
But the game is not to share who you are.
Right.
So you can have sex all day, lots of sex, because that's still part of the image. But it doesn't have anything to do with intimacy.
Right.
Anything to do with someone. This is why you always love your mom. Because your mom knows who you are.
Right. Everything.
Everything. You know what I mean? She cleaned your nose, she wiped your butt. She knows when you lie, she knows the bad you, she knows the good you.
Yeah.
And she loves you anyway. That's why mom is queen of the world. But you didn't tell everything to this chick.
No.
To this lady.
Yeah.
To your wife. I'm like, oh my God. And dude, years of therapy. I finally went in to deal with these issues, man. Now, the thing about in my culture, where I grew up,
No one does therapy.
the mind was you can't cure crazy. That was a phrase that was said. Hey, you can't cure crazy. And then you're talking about in religious circles, they were like, oh, you're going to get them demons. The demons are going to come if you go to that psychology. They're going to mess with your brain and make you crazy. So there was one time my father went to a psychologist to get help for his alcoholism. And a week later, the psychologist jumped off a bridge. And I was like, what?
Wow.
Huh?
Oh man.
He jumped off a bridge, man. And I said, okay, that don't work. That's not going to work. No. And I thought these guys were going to make me crazy. So that was the thing. Like when that broke for me, when my wife left, I was at my wit's end. Like I said, man, I got to try this therapy stuff, because I'd heard enough about it over the years.
What was the greatest lessons therapy has taught you then?
Man, assembly required. Okay? When I say this, we all think we as men or people are as good as we are. We just take me as I am. We make songs about it. You take me just as I am. No. But the problem is, this thing is, it's not anybody else's job to assemble you. You are like Legos. Okay, Legos come in a box. You shake the box, it's just pieces. And in a very competitive world, people tell you, you're broke. Hey man, look at your box. You broke it. But what I learned is that you're not broken. You're just not finished. It's up to you to assemble yourself. You have to work on you. You have to take off parts that are bad or broke or that don't fit, because nothing's broken. It's just things don't fit, and you pull it off and you put it back together the right way. It's like when you go, but you got to go deep and you got to go down. With computers, it's a bit. With property or the minerals, it's atoms. And with human beings, it's genes. I mean, it's down into the core. You get one little gene and you can rebuild yourself. That's what I got from therapy. I was like, holy cow, you can take the bad out. It's not automatic. A lot of people have said it's either nature versus nurture. But nurture always works, no matter what your nature started out as. You understand what I mean? Like, nurture is, you're in the wood. Nature is you born naked in the woods. But nurture is you learn to make a coat and put it on.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? You can build a house.
There's only two changes you'll ever make in your life. It's the ones that you've discovered for yourself or the ones that you're forced to make. That's it. There's nothing else.
Yeah.
It's either what you've seen for yourself and what you're forced, it's kind of getting shoved in your face, right? Like it's right there, which is a lot of my work. I present people with something that you're either going to try and escape from or you're going to push through. But you should know that if you're trying to escape from it, it's still there. It's amazing how folks, when you confront something as serious as this, they will fight for their misery.
Absolutely.
They'll fight for it. They will argue with you for it. Like I'll say something like this, I'll say, it's not what happened to you, it's what you decided after. And they'll say, no, it's what happened to me. And I'll say, no, it's what you decided after. And they'll say, no, it's what happened to me. Because if that hadn't happened, then I wouldn't have had that thought after. And I'll say, well, no, there's 50,000 thoughts you could have had after. You had that one.
Mm-hmm. And you held on to it.
And you held on to it, and you constructed from there. The benefit of you seeing something like that is, oh, I made the beast. Mm-hmm. Now, if I made the beast, then I can at the very least come to terms with the beast. Mm-hmm. But I could create something else. Absolutely. Like I have a profound ability to create who the heck I am. You can't get there until you confront and deal with the impact of who you've been. Mm-hmm. If you can't confront and deal with the impact of who you've been, then it's just like shellac on top of nonsense.
Yes.
Like that. You'll never have the breakthrough that you're really after.
How did you deal with the impact at that age?
Well, it was devastating because it's carnage.
Yeah.
It's carnage. Like, what did I do?
Right. Who did I hurt, or how do I impact people in a negative way?
Right, right. And then so if you're not fully responsible in that stage of things, you'll take yourself down another rabbit hole. You got to kind of be flat about it. So one of the ways that I did it is this whole notion of who's to blame. So it's a massive part of our makeup as human beings. So if you start with the idea that blame is the anchor to the past. Mm-hmm. So you're either blaming yourself or somebody else. Mm-hmm. And this thing about who's to blame will ruin you. Like it will ruin you.
Yes.
Right? And I just got like, there's nothing to blame. There's no one to blame. Everybody was doing what they were doing at the time, given their logic. And I responded in a way that I responded given my logic. I'm not making that okay.
Right.
I'm not making a case for any of that. I'm just getting, and that's what's so. And when I could get it that flat, like that's what's so, I noticed there was no charger on it for me.
Yeah.
Like nothing. Even people who have done quote unquote really bad things in my life, like really bad things, that was their logic at the time. As flawed as it was, as messed up as it was.
Yeah, not saying it's okay. Not saying you wish you experienced it again.
Right. No. And, you know, like I went through like a similar thing in my childhood, you know, where there was sexual abuse involved. It didn't happen like a ton of times, but it happened. And I look back on it like when I could see that person's humanity, you know, I wasn't making an excuse for them. I'm not making that okay. But suddenly, like, they were no longer the devil.
Yeah, and I think it's figuring out a way, like you said, not being emotionally charged to a thought or a memory. Because when we are charged emotionally or triggered to a memory or an experience or an event, or we see something that reminds us of that, it pulls us back into fear as opposed to, you know, leading us into love.
Right.
Leading us into a vision greater than the pain or the suffering or the hurt.
Right.
And we have a decision every moment. Do we want to be triggered by our past experiences, or do we want to be healed of the past experiences and focus on a mission greater than the past?
Right. That's great. I mean, if you were to sit down and write out all the stuff that happened, and it filled 10 pages, there's probably only 3 things in it that are what happened. The rest of it is
your interpretation of
your extrapolation, your interpretation, the kind of juice that gets added to it. Most of what's got you is all that stuff. Yeah. The what happened, the like that thing,
the
that
event,
thing, that thing.
The story about what happened is what kind of holds us back.
Well, yeah, because you know you're inextricably linked to that language. So, however you've captured it for yourself, and there's lots of different fields that would break this down for you, but the connection between what you say and how you feel is just there.
Right.
Right. And so you are tied to all of that language, right? Like I used to say, there was this kid at school who bullied me, and it was relentless, and it was incessant, and it was every other day, and it was cruel, and it was da, right? And then I went with, well, there was this kid who used to say things. Which is just, because that's actually what happened.
You can either believe what he was saying, or you don't have to believe it.
And all the damage was in how that was kind of captured for me in language.
Yes, how you held on to it.
Very good. So then I got to the point where, like, I really realized how attached I'd become to the narrative. Like, attached to the narrative, because it justified this. That narrative justified and explained this. And so I was no longer able to get free of this because I was so attached to that narrative. And so when I broke that down for myself and was able to get a little bit of space about it and really bring a sense of nothingness to it. Like, you know, as cruel as it might sound, so what?
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
Before the interview continues, if you feel like you're not living your most authentic life, not leaning into your purpose, and not living the life that your future self would be extremely proud of, I've written a new book called The Greatness Mindset, and I think you're gonna love this. Through powerful stories, science-backed strategies, and step-by-step guidance, The Greatness Mindset will help you overcome all the different challenges in your life to design the life of your dreams and then turn it into your reality. Make sure to click the link below in the description to get your copy today. Okay, let's get back to this video.
Why do you think it's so hard for us to be 100% authentic in relationships?
Yeah. If you would ask somebody about your characteristics, like your personality, for instance, what your strengths might be, that's what you've come across that you feel as if is a good machinery to make it in this life, right? So this is like, you know, maybe I'm charismatic, maybe I'm hardworking, maybe I'm analytical, maybe I'm, you know, competitive, maybe I'm these ways. Somewhere along the lines of your life, you realized this would be a good thing. And this gets me a little further forward.
Gets me a
all of these
result,
elements.
yeah.
Very good. So then there I am in life, being this way, and the more successful it is, the more I'm going to be this way. So now I'm more and more and more like this, to the point where there's no distinction between this thing and me. Like, we're the same now. It's this, there's no line anywhere. It's just all how you would explain yourself now. What you also realize, though, is that those ways don't work everywhere. And so what people call imposter syndrome is basically just the realization that your shtick don't stick. Like, you're like, my stuff don't work here. And so people are like, oh, well, I feel like I'm an imposter. Well, you are in many ways, but not in the way you might think. You are an imposter. There's a you there doing another you. But behind that you really is you.
So how do we get behind that you? How do we break down the thing that's been working for so long, but maybe won't continue to work in the next evolution?
If I'm, for instance, competitive, right, and it's a trait of mine, and it's stood me in good stead, and I've created a life from that, and maybe some success from that, or in my case, hardworking, right? But it could be other things. It could be analytical. It could be, and this is obviously a kind of, these are ways of being. This is an ontological element, right? Or the element of being a human being. So if I'm competitive, I can point to all the places where that's really done me well, right?
Sports and
maybe I'm in sales, right? Or maybe I'm, you know, like I'm building my own business, right? I mean, this is a strength here, right? Yeah, try taking that home.
In relationships, it doesn't work.
It's a crap show, right? Like, it's like, this is not going to work for me.
You know what's fascinating? I would say I defined my identity, a piece of my identity, most of my life as a competitor.
Yeah.
Right? Being in sports and using sports as a tool to make myself feel better, to prove the bullies wrong from childhood, all those things, and say, I'm going to make something of myself. And I'm going to win at all costs in sports and things like that. I started early in my 20s to translate that into business, and it worked in a sense.
Yes.
But it left me feeling more, I don't know, against people than it was with people.
All right, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Right, so there you are, and you were having an experience that this competitiveness actually wasn't working for you.
Right. It wasn't.
Right.
It was getting results in some way, but not results in the other ways.
Right. And so you're starting to see something there, though, that's really interesting to me, and that is, here you are being yourself, but hold on a minute. Is this myself?
And why am I suffering inside, and why am I going through these challenges?
Right. So I want to know is, what's the thing that's suffering then? Like, what's that?
Yeah, I guess it was the identity that this isn't working. Like, who I am or the way I'm being isn't working fully. It's working partially to get certain results, but it's not creating peace inside.
All right, so I would flip it the other way. I would flip it the other way, look at it from the other direction. That is, it's fine for this competitive expression, but not okay for you.
Absolutely.
And it's the you that I'm interested in. I'm interested in that because that thing right there, what matters to that thing? And so you actually pointed to it. So the thing that mattered to you then was people.
Absolutely.
But you see how like that competitiveness was now the barrier between you
Absolutely.
and people.
Besides this, the things that we can see of like, okay, they broke their word or they're negative or things like that, how do we really determine someone's character?
Well, the first thing you have to do, the most important thing is to realize that determining people's character is the most important thing that you have to do in judging them. So normally we think if someone's very charming, that's great, or if they're really good looking, or if they're very successful. So if we're looking, let's say we're looking for a business partner or a romantic partner or a colleague to work with, we're going to base our decision on those kinds of appearances. Like people can be very good at deceiving you with being very charming and flattering, or they have a brilliant resume, and you'll be seduced by that. And what you want to do, the first step in that law is to say, no, that's not how I'm going to judge people. My main value is their character and the strength of their character. And character is something from deep, deep, deep within. The word character comes from the Greek chairos, which means to carve. And character is something really deeply carved inside the person.
Wow.
It's who they are at their core. It creates patterns of behavior that they can't even really control. It's who they are genetically. It's who they are from the early values of their parents. So you want to connect to that. You want to see that. It's not immediately visible to you because people will disguise their character. You want to see that and you want to value it more than anything else. And what you want are people with strong character. And what that means is people, they have an expression for metal, they call it tensile, where a metal is stronger if it can give a little bit. And because if something is too rigid, if it breaks. So you want people who are adaptable, who can be fluid, who aren't weak, because that metal isn't weak, who have an inner strength and a core to them, but they can bend, they can learn, they can adapt, they can change. You want to see people who are empathetic, who know how to get along with other people. So if you have two people to choose and one has a glittering resume, but the other person understands human nature and is superior in a social sense and can also has a good work ethic, you choose that other person. You don't choose necessarily the person with that glittering resume. And so one of the things you look for are patterns in judging their character. Because people reveal themselves in the past. They reveal who they are through their actions. They try and disguise it, but they reveal it. So I say in that chapter, nobody ever does anything once. So let's say you have a friend who does something kind of nasty to you. They talk behind your back. Then they'll say, oh, Robert, that was just, something came over. That isn't me. I'm sorry about that. That just happened. It was circumstances made me do that. And you'll be likely to believe them. But the fact is, if they've done that once, they've probably done it many times. If people gossip and you hear them gossiping about other people, they'll probably eventually gossip about you. So you want to be able to look at people's patterns and look at their past and see trends and understand that if they've done certain things in the past, they will continue to do them because we humans have compulsive behavior. We are compelled to repeat the same mistakes over and over and over again.
How do we stop that pattern? If we recognize it within ourselves, my character's been off, I've been doing something, for years a certain way that I don't want to do anymore. How do we do it so we can strengthen our character, but also say, you know what, I believe this other person can have a stronger character through breaking a pattern? Or is it just not possible?
Of course it's possible. At the end of every chapter, I show you how you can turn this potentially negative quality into a positive quality. So when it comes to you and your own patterns, you have to first realize that you have these patterns before you can even begin to break them.
So awareness.
Honesty. This is a book about awareness and being honest with yourself. If you don't admit that you have these patterns, then you can't possibly break them. I know in writing books, I have terrible, terrible patterns.
Like what?
Well, stressing so much over things that aren't that important.
Obsessing, stressing, yeah.
Obsessing. I take note cards for everything that I read, all my research, and I take way too much information. I have like thousands of them. I'm writing, and I have to stop, and I say, stop being such a perfectionist. It's like you're wasting your time. It's been book after book after book. I'm very aware of it, and I'm very aware of breaking that pattern. But you have to see it and be honest with yourself in order to break it, you know?
Right.
So that's the first step, is seeing the pattern, and then not struggling against it, not trying to be somebody who you're not, but finding a way to use that pattern, to use that problem to your advantage. Similar to what Ryan Holiday wrote in his book, The Obstacle is the Way. I have an example in the book of an actress, Joan Crawford, from the Hollywood classical period. And she had a very troubled childhood. Didn't know her father, her mother beat her, men abused her, etc. And she managed to and it was creating terrible patterns in her life. And she found a way to turn that around, to use all of those disadvantages and make herself a much stronger and very powerful performer by bringing all of the pain in her childhood into her acting, by becoming so focused on the director. Because she had been abused, she was very sensitive to other people. She used that sensitivity to focus on the director and other actors, to be in tune with them.
To connect with them, to build relationship, is that essentially?
Yeah. She was very aware of her own weaknesses and her own fragility, and she was able to use that as a strength. So with other people, it's never hopeless. I mean, some people are toxic. I talk a lot in there about toxic characters. Those are the kinds of people who can't really change. Their patterns are too ingrained. And we've all met people like that. We've all had to deal with a narcissist who's so deeply self-absorbed. There's nothing that's ever going to save them or pull them out of that self-absorption.
Unless they have like a near-death experience, or they have someone close to them.
That's
like,
true.
You know, something where it's a big awakening.
That's true.
Or they get sick or whatever, right?
You're right. That happens. That does happen.
Sometimes.
Sometimes it does. But you have to be honest that there are people out there. You can't be naive. There are people out there who are toxic, who are dangerous, who can ruin your life. You hire the wrong person. And I've dealt with in my consulting with a lot of people who hired a business partner who ended up sort of taking the business from them. Very common scenario. You have to not be naive and recognize these toxic types. And often it's best not to try and change them, because trying to change them entangles you in a lot of their drama.
And it's just never going to happen. You might be trying for years and wasting your time and energy.
But, you know, people have to be able to to change themselves. You know, they have to be motivated. You can help illuminate some of their patterns and their problems, but it has to come from within.
Yeah. Now you talk about the law of self-sabotage.
Yeah.
And, you know, we could self-sabotage ourselves by attracting toxic people, but also what are other ways that we sabotage ourselves?
Well, this is a chapter about your attitude in life, right? And the point of that chapter is related to human nature, is none of us see the world in the same way. So you and I could go watch a movie. It's the same movie that we're watching. I love it. I see something. You hate it. You see something else. You don't experience it the same way. We're watching the same world, the same reality, but we experience it differently. Everybody you meet is experiencing their world differently than you are. So you have an attitude that colors what you see. And some people have an attitude that tends towards the negative. And I describe a negative attitude as something that's closed. So you're not open to new experience. You're trying to close that lens. You have certain beliefs, certain ideas about life, and you're not willing to change them, right? Because that gives you a sense of security. And so you want an attitude that's expansive, where you accept people. You're not always judging them. You're not negative about them. You understand that people can't necessarily help who they are. You're open to change. You're open to having adventure, And that kind of attitude kind of gives you a certain degree of freedom, so that the worst thing can happen to you and you're able to transform that into something good. So what your question was...
How do we recognize when we're sabotaging ourselves, and what's the things we do most to self-sabotage?
Well, if we have a setback or a failure in life, which is inevitable, do we do one of two things? Do we analyze ourselves and see what we did wrong and how we could change ourselves? Or do we immediately look outward and blame other people? That person screwed me. Society doesn't like me. Because of these circumstances, I'm screwed and I can never help it. It's the world, it's not me. That's a self-sabotaging pattern of behavior. Because if you're always pointing fingers at other people and blaming them, you're never going to learn from your experiences. And you're going to end up being quite bitter. So that's probably one of the main sources of a self-sabotaging.
So you could easily say, this stupid bee that stung my neck, that caused this blood clot and this high pressure in me, I blame the bee for this stroke that I had. Screw you, bee. Or you could take responsibility and say, well, what did I do to my health leading up to the bee sting, for years, and taking full ownership and responsibility.
Right.
Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, that's what you're hearing.
And the story and the perception around the experience, the way you see that movie playing out, having a positive attitude around it.
And reflecting about the role that you played in what happened. So we're not in charge of everything that happens in life. There are circumstances that are beyond our control, right? But a lot of what does happen to us is something that we do, that we are responsible for. There are amazing studies about the role of attitude and what happens to you in life. So they have this thing called the Pygmalion effect. Teachers who treat a student as if they are smart and going to do well, those students end up doing well, right? So how you treat people, how you think about yourself has a great impact on what happens to you. When doctors prescribe a new medication, there's always the same trend that when a new medication has been invented, the success rate is like 80% because people believe in it because it's new. And then 2 years later, it starts going down because it's not, it's a placebo effect. So if you believe something is going to work, if you believe that you are great and you deserve good things, that you are a good student, you will end up making those things happen. So how you look at yourself will often determine what ends up happening to yourself. So if you're talking about what causes self-sabotage, if you go through life thinking, God, I'm not really that good, there's something wrong with me. I don't really deserve good things. I don't deserve to have a lot of success or to have a lot of money. People read that off of you. A major theme in this book is that we are masters at reading people's body language and nonverbal behavior. So when somebody feels that they don't deserve things, it's kind of an off-putting quality in them, and it pushes people away. So you create self-fulfilling dynamics by how you look at yourself and your attitude. I had a chapter in the 48 Laws of Power called Think Like a King to be Treated Like One. And there's a story of Christopher Columbus, who came from dirt poor poverty, but imagined that he was royalty. And by imagining that, people started treating him like that. And as they treated him like that, he felt even more kind of greater about himself. And he was able to convince the king of Portugal to give him these ships, when in fact he was sort of a mediocre captain. So your attitude and how you think about yourself will sort of determine how people treat you and what happens in life.
Yeah, I always say that we're either, life's an enrollment game, and we're either enrolling people in our vision or unenrolling people by the way we're showing up, our energy, our language, what
do you mean by enrolling?
I'm enrolling you to come on my show.
Yeah.
And getting you to come on my show because of the energy I put out, the relationship we have, the connection, the platform. Or I'm unenrolling you by the way I've treated you over the last 6 or 7 years, but
Yeah.
the platform being out of integrity or not doing that well,
Yeah.
you're not going to be as excited to want to say yes.
Yeah.
You know, we're influencing people all the time,
You are influencing people
in a
all
positive
the
or
time.
negative way, right? It's
Yes, everything you do, people are reading and they're either saying, I like that or I don't like that,
Yes
or
or no.
I'm indifferent.
Yeah, yes is like I'm enrolling you, yes, or I'm not enrolling you is a no. And you talk about the chapter that I really like is about
Number seven.
Where are we at here? Where am I at here? Where did I get
Soften
this?
people's resistance.
No,
Okay.
where are we at? The persuasive one.
Yeah, 7.
Is that one? Yeah, right here. The 5 strategies to becoming a master persuader. Is that this one? Yeah, right here. 7. Yeah.
Well, you, Lewis, don't need to read that chapter because you already have that kind of mastered.
But I think people need to understand this.
Yeah.
Because I think what we just talked about right there is probably one of the most powerful parts of this whole book in my mind and in life is, are you enrolling people in your vision?
Yeah.
In being the king or queen, in getting the ships that you want? Are you stepping up and enrolling people and getting people to say yes to you?
Yeah.
Or your dreams, or hire you, or date you, or
Yeah.
marry you?
Yeah.
Or are you not showing up in a way that people want to say yes to you?
Right.
And I feel like
Key question.
my whole business has been built on getting people to say yes. When I
Yeah.
had nothing, I was on my sister's couch 10 years ago,
Yeah.
no money,
Yeah.
no skills, no degree, and it was an energy that I had to learn how to just get people to say yes, and then
Yeah.
and then building momentum around that. So I'd love to talk about this, becoming a master persuader. And the first thing you talk about is, which I think most people aren't doing, you say, is to deepen your listening and
Yeah.
be a better listener. Most people don't have the patience to care about someone else. They're so concerned about what they think about them.
Well, people always talk about being a better listener, and their advice is usually very weak. I mean, it isn't ineffective because, okay, I've become a better listener. Yeah, I'll try that, but it's very hard to overcome certain patterns. So I try to tackle the question of, why is it that you're not a good listener? And at the root of that is, you're more interested in yourself than you are in the other person. You won't deny that. You will say, oh, no, that's not me. That's not me. I really like people. But the truth is, you're more interested in your own thoughts and your own ideas, things that you're so certain about, your own experiences, than about that other person and what they're saying and what's going on inside them. If you can flip that around, if you can actually feel the motivation to get inside Lewis and get inside his head and his experience, then you will suddenly become a better listener. That's the key, not just telling people to listen more. The key is the quality of the listening and the emotion involved. So if I feel I want to get inside that other person, inside their life, then suddenly you will start listening. What will make you interested in other people? Well, first off is the idea you don't know them. Normally, when let's say you're on a first date with someone or you're just meeting someone, you have assumptions about them. You create a simplified version of who they are, and that's what you think, and that'll stay with you forever. Instead, you want to think, that person is more interesting than I imagine. Their first appearance isn't really who they are. They're like a book that I could read. We love going to movies and getting inside other characters and what motivates them, being taken along for a ride. Think of the people that you meet in life as a character in a movie. You want to know what motivates them. They are more interesting than you think. They've had traumas, they've had problems from their early childhood. They have fantasies. They have a shadow, a dark side to their personality they're not revealing. They're more complicated and interesting than you think. So if you're motivated to understand what makes them tick, their experience, suddenly you will start listening.
Yeah.
So that's the key to me. And it's not easy.
Why is it so hard for people? Because for me, it's been an easy thing because I've used my insecurity of not feeling like I was smart enough growing up because I was one of the poorest students in school.
Yeah.
So I was like, my voice doesn't matter as much. Let me just ask smart people what they think.
Right.
And it became a huge advantage for me
Right.
because I've learned that being the most interested person in the room, you become the most interesting.
Well, the key is really so much in the book is, are you motivated to change yourself? Do you want to become successful in life? This book is trying to realign your priorities and how you look at the world. Normally, your focus is on yourself and on your work and the techniques in your work, you know, the skills you have to master. And I'm telling you, the key to success in life is people. We're a social animal. You know, we're like dogs or wolves or whatever, chimpanzees. We're a social animal. And how we interact with people will determine how far we get. You can be brilliant at hacking computers or whatever, but if you're terrible with people, your life is going to be hell. So are you motivated to become somebody supremely skilled at understanding and working with people? That's the whole point of the book. You have to buy into that. You have to buy into the fact that you're usually bad at dealing with people. You're not seeing who they are, you're seeing reflections of your own fantasies or projections. You have to admit that you're not good at dealing with people and you need to improve. If you understand that and you want to change and you're motivated to get out of your shell, then you can make that leap. I'm a big advocate of baby steps. You're not going to suddenly transform yourself into Bill Clinton overnight.
Right. And remember thousands of people's names and
or suddenly become a great listener. So every day you give yourself little tests. So you have now lunch with this person who you normally find kind of boring. All right, for 10 minutes, I'm gonna shut off my internal monologue and I'm gonna force myself to listen to them, and I'm gonna glean some information, some nugget about their character that I never understood before. I'm gonna ask them about their childhood. I'm not gonna be like, it's not gonna be that kind of inquisition where I'm asking them, you know, penetrating questions, but in a relaxed mood, I'm going to find out about something that really motivates them, or something deep, or some traumatic experience they had.
Each moment is an opportunity to detour into fear, and then we create a world of fear-based perceptions. And so what we must do to live and thrive and feel good is undo those fear-based perceptions. And I believe through a spiritual path or through maybe a therapeutic path. I mean, I think spirit's in all of it, whether you realize it or not.
Yeah.
But to make a commitment to feel better means that you're committed to returning to God, or love, or you know, spirit,
universe,
whatever you
yeah.
call it. Yes.
You also talk about how we have guides. And it's funny because my girlfriend, who's amazing, and she'll always tell me, she's like, you know, your angels are always watching you.
Yeah, she's a spiritual being, right?
She's like,
I can see it.
There's angels that are always supporting me whenever I'm in trouble. I'm like focused on my angels. I'm like, where are these angels? Like, how do we know they're here? Who are these guides? Like, how can we tap into this belief that there are, whether it's our ancestors, spiritual beings, whatever it may be, are here with us, are guiding us.
We're talking about this on the School of Greatness.
Protecting us, are leading us into a path of love.
Yeah. So what I write about in my book is what I believe, and I always have a big disclaimer that says this is an opportunity to crack you open to believing something new, and if it's not for you, you choose how you choose to perceive this. So not only do I talk about spirit guides and angels and deceased family members, but I also talk about your higher self. So if this is too woo-woo for you, start to tap into what is the voice of my higher self.
Gotcha.
Right? That voice of my inner guidance system, and that wisdom that I believe in is my true nature, right? But I personally, Gabby Bernstein, I believe that we all have guides, ancestors, family members, teachers, beings of light beings, energy beings that are supporting us in a form that is able to step in, able to channel through us when we write books, able to be there in those darkest moments, pick us up off the floor, and hold us in discomfort and guide us to business opportunities or babies or whatever it is that we're looking for. And it's always available to us, that guidance, but we cut it off, we block it. And
Why
so
do we block the guidance?
Fear is the reason we block it. Fear
of what?
It's not even fear, it's that false-based perception that we've built up around ourselves from those traumatic events, right? So we have these traumatic events early in life and they continue to build and build and build. We build up a world of false perceptions. I am this body, I am Gabby Bernstein, I am Lewis Howes, I've got the School of Greatness,
People are
I'm
out
a
to
New York
get
Times
me. No,
bestseller.
I can't trust people. We create these beliefs.
And you believe you're separate from others, you believe you're better than or less than or not good enough. And all those stories, all those false pretenses are what many spiritual practices call the ego, right? And that fear-based perception of yourself is misaligned with God, with love, with spirit, with angels, with guides. And so this book is all about how to get back into alignment so that you can hear that guidance and receive that guidance and be a channel for inspiration. And when you clear and undo those patterns of fear and start to claim the pattern of love, that's when you are hooked up, super attractor. Doors,
Unstoppable.
Unstoppable. Invisible doors open for you. It doesn't matter how low you are when you're starting this, you will go way further than you could possibly have imagined. And I am standing behind that subtitle, Methods for Manifesting a Life Beyond Your Wildest Dreams. Standing behind it.
I love that. What's the difference between spiritual guides or guides and intuition?
You could call it the same thing. Your guides are your bridge from your fear-based thoughts back to your love, right? So if you pray and say, God, guide, higher self,
angels, whatever.
I give this to you. Figure it out, right? I don't know I'm gonna get through this time, but yeah, I give it to you. That's how we surrender. People are like, I don't know how to surrender. I don't want to let it go. I don't know how to. Through prayer. Okay, prayer is the conduit. And then when we say that prayer or that intention, whatever you want to call it, and we allow ourselves to give it over to a higher power of our own understanding, a guide, God, spirit, grandma, whoever, then we're taking that difficult experience, we're handing it over, and then we relax.
Yeah.
Because we think, okay, it's not on my shoulders anymore.
It's like taking our ego out of ourself and putting it over here and saying someone
giving
else
it
is
over,
going to handle
help me
it.
undo this. And then their job is to pay attention. What's going to show up for us? And so pay
How do we
close
pay attention?
Just be aware, stay calm, and stay chill, right? And be conscious of how things start to speed up, or the synchronicities that begin to happen around you. Or if you are like, guides, I want to see a sign, and you're like, I need butterflies, and butterflies are everywhere.
Right.
And I'm getting thousands and thousands of emails from readers that are reading this book in the last 2 weeks it's been out, and they're just like, Gabby, every single sign I've asked for is coming to me, and like it just speeds up. Ask for a sign today. If you're having a difficult experience, say, guides, what would your sign be? Don't think, just say it. Just say it, don't think.
Oh, the sign itself?
Like a pumpkin or anything.
An eagle.
Eagle is your sign. That's a good one. It's strong.
Yeah.
See how he answered that? It's got to be the first thing that comes to mind. And now, if there's an issue that's happening in your life, just say to yourself silently, today at the end of this podcast, just say, thank you, guides, thank you, universe, whatever you believe in, right? For showing me my eagle to remind me that I'm on the right path.
So ask for the sign, the eagle.
Thank you for revealing my eagle.
Thank you for revealing it before I see the eagle.
Yeah, thank you for revealing my eagle to remind me that I am being guided.
Okay.
Okay?
And the eagle will mean whatever I give the meaning to, whether it's to make a decision on something
if it's just being guided in general, or if it's
Gotcha.
being guided towards that job or that healing or
Interesting.
that whatever, right? Sometimes I'll use a sign like if I'm like, am I supposed to take this deal and I don't know what to do and
Exactly.
I'm feeling so uncomfortable about it. And I'll say, show me a sign, and I'll get this. And the thing is, if you don't get your sign, that's a sign too. But you absolutely will get your sign. If you're asking to be shown that you're being guided, 100% you're going to get your sign.
Okay.
Lewis is going to text me later, everybody.
It's on the eagle.
My eagle! Just send me a photo, like some massive eagle.
So give me an example for people.
And it could be an eagle like in a photo, or an eagle,
Any
on a
image of me.
napkin.
Not some eagle sitting on my window, which would be amazing if that happened.
Could be that
but,
too.
So let's give an practical example for someone. Say someone says there's a female listening or a male listening and saying, okay, should I go on a date with this person?
Yeah.
A second date with this person, right? Just something small.
Show me my sign.
Show me my sign.
Yeah.
And what if you don't see, and the sign is to reveal that you're supposed to go on this date or to give you some
And
guidance.
if you don't get the sign, then, and you decide to go on the date anyway, it's okay. There's still some learning in that.
Yeah.
There might be there's been times where I've done things where I didn't get my sign and they didn't work out necessarily, but I still learned something from the experience.
Has there ever been a time where you didn't see a sign and it did work out? Maybe you saw the sign later or something.
It worked out in a different way,
Yeah, okay.
right? So like if I was like, I need a sign about this situation and I didn't get the sign, here's an example from the book. So I was, my 2 weeks before I was meant to conceive, my doctor, who was like a very conservative, Yale-trained physician in my little tiny country town, was like, you're turning, well, I just turned 39. I was 38 when I was pregnant, and I just turned 39. So he considered me 40. Okay. I was like, dude, I was 38 a week ago, and now I'm fucking 40. So he makes me 40. And he's like, we believe that you need to deliver 40 and 40 weeks when you're 40 years old. And I was resisting. And I was like, I'm not 40, and I don't want to be induced, and I don't want to force the baby out, and I don't want to have that kind of thing. And I was so torn up because he was so nervous, and that was infiltrating my fears.
Yeah.
And so I was in his office, and I was like, okay, universe, I can't make the decision. I need a sign. And so I said, show me a sign if following this path is the right move. And he walked in the door, and he was wearing this necktie. And I said, Howie, what's on your tie? And he said, it's a cardinal. And I said, okay. In my head, I'm like, that's my sign. It's a cardinal. And so the next day I had to make a decision if I wanted to get booked. So I didn't have an opportunity to see my cardinal before I made that quote, that decision, because I had to book him in the schedule. And he was leaving the next week. It was a mess. So I made the decision without seeing the sign. I said, to be induced, to schedule an induction.
Wow.
It's not what I wanted. And so I made that decision. I was in my bath. I texted my girlfriend. I said, okay, I'm going to be induced. This is happening. And she writes back to me, that's a great decision. I feel really good about it. And I know it's good for you because I saw a cardinal land on my window just now. Cardinal landed on my window.
Did you tell her the sign?
She had no idea about the sign.
Wow.
But here's the thing. So I got my cardinal. It gave me the guidance that I was on the right path. I was meant to be induced on a Wednesday. On a Monday, I'm lying in my bed and I'm finishing the finishing touches of the book because I wanted to deliver the book before I delivered the baby.
Right.
So I stand up to go to the bathroom, and my water breaks.
No way.
And then here I am, and I have the most epic Beyonce birth. Like, there was nobody at the hospital. I had like rolling hills out my window, and like I was the only one birthing in the maternity ward.
Oh my gosh.
And I had, the sun setting. So the whole point is that my sign was saying, yeah, you're on the right track. Make the decision so that I could relax. Because if I hadn't made that decision,
Stressed.
I wouldn't have relaxed. My water wouldn't have broke because I would have been too freaked out and tense. And everything worked out.
Wow.
Do you see what I'm saying here?
Yeah, of
So if you
course.
don't see your sign, that's still guidance. And then, if you get your sign, even if it's something you didn't want,
What has been the biggest lesson of motherhood that you were unexpectedly, because you have lots of friends who are mothers.
Yeah, I had no
You
idea
have
what it was
so
gonna
many
be.
fans of yours who are moms that you speak to all the time, and maybe you thought you knew what they were going through, or you could speak into some of their challenges, but what have you really learned? Maybe 3 biggest lessons so far about
All right, good.
motherhood and what moms experience
Yeah.
in the first year of motherhood.
So in terms of what moms experience and what happens, and I think my son has given me the greatest gift of healing I could ever have imagined.
Really?
Because as soon as I became pregnant, what happens for women is all your shit comes up, and for men too.
Oh, yeah.
When you're like about to bring life into the world and be responsible for that
scared.
life, your darkest demons start to come to the surface, and so many people just push it down. And so I don't push things down. I was like, let's go. Okay, I'm ready. I'm willing. Let's go for this. And so I worked at it along the way, and then the postpartum, and that gave me even a greater step of healing. So his presence in my life has already put me on a massive healing path. I've had, fast forward healing in the last year and a half. So that I'm grateful.
Wow.
My son has taught me that I am going to make my highest priority in life to honor his feelings.
Wow.
People keep asking me, like, what's your parenting advice? I'm like, look, I've been doing this for 10 months, but I can tell you this. Honor their feelings. Imagine that was something that we experienced.
Amazing.
I mean,
Beautiful.
you'd be a different person. I'd be a different
Beautiful.
person. And if we could honor any human's feelings, any human being, particularly a child. And then I guess the third thing that I've learned as a mother, there's so much, but is that they have their own guides. They have their own. They're not. Oh, this is big. He is not my son, Oliver Rockland. He is not the son to Zach, the son to Gabby. He is his own spirit having a human experience.
Wow.
And he is a person. He's not a baby.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you're just here to guide him. You're here to.
I am in a archetypal position to be a guide and a love and a support for him. But I find myself often being like, my baby's so cute, my baby. And then I have to stop myself and say, Oliver, not my baby. He's not my baby. He's him.
Wow. So when we reflect our judgment on someone else. We don't like something, we're angry at them, we're pissed off at them, whatever it is. How can we shift that to see the good in them?
Read Judgment Detox.
Okay.
Because I'm sitting, sometimes I'm just like, yeah, I wrote a book about it.
Yeah, exactly.
And
I get it.
But I'll answer your question fully right now, which is like, when we are in judgment of somebody else, what's happening is that we're projecting onto them our own wounds.
Gosh.
And so the second step of Judgment Detox is to, well, the first step is
Heal
to
your wounds.
is to honor your wounds.
Yeah. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
It's so hard.
You know-
so hard to not judge other people, isn't it?
It gets a lot of, I gotta
gets
tell you,
easier when
that
you practice
book
it, yeah.
helped me so much. And do I not judge all the time? Of course I still judge. But when I judge, I don't believe in it. And I get out of it quickly.
So what do you say when you're judging someone else?
I witness my judgment without judgment, step one. I honor the wound. Okay, I'm judging them because I'm feeling insecure. I'm judging them because they're triggering something, right? And then I continue on the journey of the Judgment Detox, which, just releasing and forgiving and seeing someone for the first time, choosing to see them through the lens of love. It's a fabulous book.
See them through a lens of love, yeah.
Yeah.
Get that book too. What do you think is your greatest accomplishment in 40 years of life?
My greatest accomplishment in 39 years, 2 weeks away from 40. Don't age me. I can't believe I'm 40. Oh my God. So my greatest accomplishment is the freedom I'm feeling right now, today, here with you, is my greatest accomplishment. My recovering from trauma is my greatest accomplishment. It will be the best contribution I can give to the world. I am going to help people because even just being in this state of freedom will help people watching because they will see what they're capable of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's powerful. And do you feel like you'll be able to make a bigger impact in the world by being a mother, or?
I'm already, yeah. So I've noticed myself in my talks, I would always have a really good boundary, which you have to have, as you know, when we do the work we do. Because if I'm going to get up and answer questions, people, my audience is like, coming up being like, I have a brain injury, or I'm suicidal, or I'm, and I have to hold them in their transformation, but not take it on. But as a mother now, I don't feel that I'm taking it on, but I have a way deeper level of compassion for people that I never had before.
Because you're experiencing all this stuff.
I'm seeing their innocent child in them.
Wow.
I don't see them as an adult who hasn't taken care of themselves or as an adult who's done stupid things. I see them as a wounded child, and all I want to do is just hold them into love. And even at one of my talks, this one woman was so wounded, and I actually went as far as asking her to come up so I could just hug her. And that is so against everything I've ever done in my career.
Why?
I would never touch someone or have it. It doesn't mean that I wouldn't hug somebody casually, but I held her like an Amma hug. You know what I mean? I was like, and I kept holding her and I said, "You're safe, you're safe, you're safe." And I didn't know what came over me. The other thing that's happening is I'm becoming more unapologetic about my mediumship. So we're all mediums. We all have the ability to listen to spirit but I can, I've throughout my life have always heard messages, and now I'm just giving messages to people. And I always have channeled throughout my talking, but now where normally I would say, okay, this is the guidance. If I'm hearing it as a guide, I'll say, what I'm hearing for you is this. And I'll deliver it in a different way.
Yeah, that's smart. Yeah. So people can receive it, not if they don't believe in some type of medium stuff, they can receive
Sometimes
it.
I'll just tell them, I think, your grandmother is telling me something.
Tim's telling you this, yeah.
Sometimes, not always.
I've never had someone who calls himself a medium that does this practice on the show. I've been pitched different mediums to come on, and I've always been kind of resistant, but lately I'm like, I think it'd be a fun experience for me to.
You should have someone.
Is there someone that you think is the best at what they do?
There's so many. I mean, let's talk offline because I could sit here and tell you 5 or 6 different names, and I don't want to offend anybody out there. I know a lot of mediums.
Sure.
I don't want that one being like, why didn't you say me on Lewis House? So I'll give you some suggestions. Yeah,
great.
They're all good though.
It'll be fun.
Yeah.
What do you think is missing from you to get to the next level in your life, whatever that looks like for you? What's missing?
There's a little bit more trauma work that I've got to face. It's not missing though. It's not like it's in perfect time.
Around what? What's the trauma around?
Just a lot of the sexual trauma, the shame around the sexual trauma.
Yeah, because you talked about it on our show a couple years ago, I think, a couple years ago. And I know you've been doing a lot of work over the last few years with it, but do you feel like you're not fully healed with those things yet? I don't think I am either. Even though I talk about it for the last 6 years.
You're more healed than ever before, but
I'm at peace a lot about it, but there's still little triggers.
Yeah, EMDR.
Yeah, so I keep hearing that.
I really recommend it to you.
Okay, I'll try that.
Yeah.
Where do you think you'll be once you have that final healing?
Freedom is my end game, right? I hope to live for a long, long time feeling free. You know, I did talk with Deepak Chopra yesterday, and I was on the plane with him coming here, and we were chatting about, you know, I was like, do you feel triggered or traumatized? You know, he's like, not at all.
With
I'm happy
nothing.
all the time, and it's because of his practice. It's because of his devotion to his practice. So I'm getting closer and closer to that. It doesn't mean I'll be enlightened. It doesn't mean I'll have bad experience. I won't have bad experiences. It doesn't mean I won't be a human, but that I can feel free, even when things are tough.
What do you think it is that he has or people like him have that allow them to have zero connection to, or not allow the ego to affect them in a triggering way, in a reactive, defensive way, guarded, when maybe something bad happens to him, maybe a business deal goes down?
He's a person who grew up being taught that the divine is the direction. That, you know, God was I don't want to use language that's not his, but
Right.
he had a very spiritual upbringing. So it was a foundational experience for him, and he's devoted his life to being at ease and meditate. He's up very early, meditates for 2 hours, I think, in the morning.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think it's his devotion and commitment that's let him be that way.
Isn't it amazing that when I am consistent with my meditation practice, I feel like I'm unstoppable. Like the longer I meditate, I feel like I see, it's like the Matrix. You'll see someone saying something to you,
And
and
it's
see someone
exactly
cut you
what
off.
you need. You
And
become a super attractor.
like, oh,
This is what the
wow.
whole book is about, baby.
Yeah.
Is that the more we practice being in alignment,
Yeah.
the more that unstoppable experience occurs.
Yeah.
But when we are just living out of alignment, we feel out of alignment.
That's
Doesn't
it.
work- Things don't work.
That's it.
We're pushing.
What do you think's missing from your point of view as a friend to me? What's missing in my life to help me attract more of good things that I want in my
I think
life?
there's a little more trauma work to do. I can feel it, and you've said it a few times.
Yeah.
And so I'm gonna hold your hand while I say this because I love you so much, and I will help you if you need any guidance and support, just to listen and be there for you, because you have the potential for that same freedom that I'm talking about now. We all do, but particularly you're right there. But there's there's shame and there's places to go to that I think you're ready to go now.
Yeah.
And that it hasn't been. There's been no step along the way that's been an accident. It's all been perfect order for you, and it's all been unfolding perfectly.
Yeah.
And, you know, humbling moments and difficult times and things that come up only to get you to the place where you're ready to crack open more and face some of the darkest stuff.
Right.
And you need to do that with so I am hearing that you need to do that with a facilitator that you trust, someone that you feel safe with, and someone that will really hold that space for you to go to the places that scare you.
Sounds good. I'm in.
Because you're doing really big shit in the world, you know, big stuff, big work, and it's going to be massive the more free you become.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm excited. I'm excited to continue to work.
And I'm really proud of you, because the fact that you even asked that question is so major, because it means you're willing.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm so proud. I love you so much.
Thank you. I love you. Yeah, and you said the first step is willingness. And what? You said willingness is the key for something before in one of our interviews.
Willingness is the catalyst for change, because the moment that we become willing, it's like we invite the next right action. We invite God into our life to show us where to go and what to do. The willingness that you've developed over your life over the last 36 years got you into this seat right now with me while we're talking about things that we've both been through, for you to say what's next, and for me to honestly and authentically say, this is what I think is next.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so
I
that's
trust
your
you. I trust
That's your
you.
willingness.
My learning happened through really painful, unsafe relationships.
Really?
Yeah, well, I was really looking for someone to affirm me from a very young age, and so all of my relationships up until my early 20s were very abusive.